All right, guys, let's get into it. So Sony released a new camera, the FX5, which is, I guess, in between the FX3 and the FX6. And it's supposed to pair really well with the Burano and the Sony Venice. What do I think about this? Well, if you know me, I'm not really a camera dude. I'm not really into specific cameras. I like Red, I like Blackmagic, but I've never really been a Canon or a Sony fanboy. I think that the camera doesn't really matter. There is features that are helpful. Usually I think that Sony's a bit overrated, and I've used the FX3, I've used the FX9, I've used FX6. I'm familiar with all the cameras. I've used the Venice, I've used even shot with the Burano on set, and I'm familiar with the cameras and I know what their strengths and weaknesses are. I just saw that CVP posted their full in-depth review. It's about an hour long or so. So go check out CVP's review if you guys are into like figuring out all the specs and everything. I'm just going to do like a general overview of what I think of this. This is kind of my reaction to this camera. The FX5 by Sony. Yeah. So I don't know. It's an interesting camera. I think that they fixed a lot of things. Still got a full frame sensor. They went a little bit more high resolution, went with 5K instead of 4K. I currently shoot with the 6K Pro. It's been a 6K camera since 2021. I've been used to 6K cameras and 8K cameras with Red and that codec. You have a RAW format. Now finally in Sony, we're getting a RAW format. I just feel like Sony had to do that. They didn't have a RAW format. They only had it in the Burano and in the Venice. So now, you know, all these people were shooting with external recorders and things like that. So it's good that they finally came out with some sort of a RAW format and a decent codec. They have the compressed codecs, which are better for probably most videographers and most projects. But if for the high-end cinema stuff, it's good that they do have somewhat of a better, more robust codec. And because they have that codec, you need higher bitrate cards. You need bigger cards for this thing. So for the Type A cards that you're going to be using, you know, it has the dual slots, which is really nice. You can use your SD cards plus your Type A cards. And it is nice that you can use SD cards, but you can't get all those full resolutions and frame rates and everything with those cards. So you do need to get upgraded Sony like tough cards or whatever to be able to get the most out of those. Also, the battery had to be increased. You have to have a larger battery. So a lot of Sony people are upset that their batteries are not going to be working. So I think most people who are using this camera are probably going to rig it up with V-mounts and things like that. But as a crash cam or as something that they're going to just integrate as a B or a C camera for interviews, just a second angle, something to match the Burano or the Venice. Who is this camera for? I think this camera is for people who are doing high-end cinema work. It just seems like camera that is kind of slotted in there. They have the addition to OpenGate, which is maybe better for content creators and people who are making stuff for the 16:9 and the 9:16 aspect ratios. And it is nice to have that. But on the higher end in movies and whatnot, it's not something that we're using all that often. For the most part, I'm not really into Sony cameras, but looking at this camera and the features and everything that it has, I'm actually really impressed that Sony made a camera like this. I feel like it's a bit too expensive for what it is. It's about $5,000, $6,000. We'll see what it ends up being. But for this price, it's like, why wouldn't you just get the FX6? And I see how it kind of slots between the Burano and the FX5 or FX3. So FX3, FX6, Burano, how this kind of slots in. It just seems like it should be a little bit less expensive, but they don't want to cannibalize the FX3 because the sales of the FX3 are really impressive. So all in all, I think this is a really impressive camera. It's probably something that I'm going to rent when it becomes available in my market. There's a project where I want to do probably more narrative or documentary work. I'm going to lean toward this camera if I need a smaller build. If I need a gimbal camera or a smaller build, I'm probably going to lean toward this camera. I'm pretty impressed with the footage that I've seen so far, and it actually really looks amazing. One thing that people are super happy about is the addition of the false color inside of the menus. You know, Blackmagic, Red, we've had false color in camera for so long, and a lot of people who are using this camera with a professional monitor, they're going to have false color and things like that. But now that it has that viewfinder, being able to have false color inside the viewfinder and on that bigger rotatable screen, it's nice. But it just seems like other companies like Blackmagic and Panasonic with the Lumix cameras, they have that, you know, 4-way rotating screen, so you can get the low angles, and then you can also flip it out to the side so you're not blocking the HDMI and the little microphone ports. So it's kind of cool that they're doing that. Fujifilm has had a screen like that for a while. Blackmagic has that kind of screen. It's more geared toward being behind the camera as a camera operator rather than a selfie screen, but it can also do the selfie screen kind of thing and spin around, and it's actually a little bit bigger, which is nice because you're shooting open gate. All in all, seems like this camera is really solid, has some really cool features, and I'm excited to see what people start doing with it. You know, more cameras like this get out into the market, hopefully prices will come down with all the other cameras out there. And if you're already in that Sony ecosystem, it just makes sense. Anyways guys, I'm Scott Stevenson, thanks for watching. Feel free to check out some of my past videos as well as subscribe to see my future ones.